More medications, less health. Something's broken. Traditional medicine manages symptoms, but true healing addresses root cause. I'm Josh Rimini, pharmacist turned healer. At Beyond the Pills, we merge ancient wisdom with modern day science to inspire you through stories of transformation, practical trainings, and holistic healing. Join me and other practitioners as we guide you towards vibrant health, body, mind, and spirit, and move beyond symptom management into true healing. Welcome back to Beyond the Pills, where the podcast where we explore healing at the intersection of ancient wisdom meets modern science. Hello again, everybody. I'm your host, Josh Rimini, pharmacist turned healer. And today's guest is someone special who embodies the courage to pivot from burnout to purpose. Dr. Susan Baumgaertel, also known as Dr. B. She began her internal medicine practice in 1996, working across many clinical roles over the years. But like so many of us, she reached a crossroads. And in 2021, in response to the growing pressure of corporatized healthcare, she made a big, bold move, launching her own independent business that offers medical consultation, patient advocacy, and professional compass support for physicians seeking reinvention. She's the founder of Menopause Menu, a free online hub supporting women physically and emotionally through midlife transitions. In 2023, she self-published the Menopause Menu and continues to speak, write, and advocate for change in how we approach both medicine and menopause. Whether you're a patient, a practitioner, or someone simply looking to navigate transformation, I believe this conversation will remind you of the power of reclaiming your passion, protecting your energy, and walking daily towards a life that feels aligned. Welcome, Dr. B.
Oh, that's such a lovely intro. Thank you so much. I'm just delighted to be here.
I love doing those because every time I do it, it's like you get to hear your story a little bit, right? And it's just like, oh yeah, I do that stuff and that's fun and I do that. So I like to word it so we could like just dive right in, you know?
I get a little misty
that. So let's just dive in. You know, it's you started practicing internal medicine in the 90s. Obviously, things are drastically different this day and age. Which is why we talk about a lot of these things on our podcast. But let's talk about your backstory. Let's talk a little bit about this and how and what made you pivot to starting your own business, advocate. Like there's a shift here, right? So let's talk through your story because I think people learn through story, and let's start with that.
Yeah, well, I think there are so many shifts in life, right? That everyone makes. And I think that when I look back, my early career before medicine, my degree was in architecture and urban planning. So I was from Seattle originally, grew up in Ontario, Canada, came back. And it was important for me to kind of really embrace the arts. My late mother was an artist. And so art was all around me. And so later on, we can talk about the art and science of medicine. But, to me, that's so integral into what I do. And so when I started med school and then I went through residency, stayed in Seattle. So I hung up my shingle metaphorically in 1996 and started full-time practice. And, back then, internal medicine, we did everything. I did all of the hospital admissions, all hospital rounds. I did nursing home rounds. I took care of people in their home in their bed dying. I'd had my full-time, outpatient practice. So over the decades, of course, the advent of the hospitalists. And so, most physicians in primary care were almost, booted out of the hospital, so to speak. So really my practice condensed and became exclusively outpatient. But the things that I really cherish were programs that were a little off the beaten trail. So I formed a program called Menu for Change, and it ran for 7 years from 2012 to 2019. And its kind of tagline was, weight management and wellness, but it really kind of blossomed into a much more robust holistic program. And so imagine working in a very large, multi-specialty, physician-owned group and then be the only one who kind of had other people helping out. So I had naturopathic docs, acupuncturists, registered dietitian nutritionist, psychologist, sports physiologist, someone who taught Tai Chi and Qigong, someone who, taught yoga, who did, personal training workouts. I had a walking group, I had a support group, I had monthly lectures, we had potlucks, so I had a recipe book. I mean, all those things kind of woven into this program that was at the root really helping all people. Most of them are women, but people who just wanted to live better, function better. And this is kind of a little bit kind of before the times because wasn't quite
Yeah, I'm just thinking that. I'm
mainstream.
thinking like, oh my God, this is the definition of integrative medicine. And it's like,
Right.
didn't really work that way back then,
No. And, I remember.
That's so cool. I just thinking back like into the like going back into the past and trying to visualize that because like literally that's what we've created in our pharmacy today, right? This is way back like when you're talking integrative and you're seeing results obviously, right? Because that's why you built the thing.
Oh, and dare I become scientific for a moment, but we tracked metrics. Of course we did. One metric is weight. Yeah, of course. One would be waist measurement. One would be BMI, and that's kind of fallen off
Mhm.
the wagon in terms of more validity. But I tracked so many things if they were biochemical, like what their A1C, if they're pre-diabetic or diabetic, what their cholesterol, lipid panels, what their inflammation levels were. But I also tracked how they felt, how they functioned, what their energy was like, what their mood was like, what their sleep was like, what their movement was like. And so I have lots of data. And I think that's where, interestingly, because when I started all this, I think a lot of my colleagues were like, what is she doing? But then they would see patients, perhaps specialists, because I'm primary care, and they would say, like, wow, that's interesting, and never once did I wag my finger and say, like, oh, get off your medicines. Medicines are evil. But it was a very natural progression that I was famous for getting people off their meds because, it doesn't mean that medications are not necessary, but it was so nice to blend it all together. And so, that was one kind of proud feather in my cap that I still really think about quite fondly.
Well, I love that because I've gone through that journey as well as a pharmacist. Like it's not that medications aren't necessary, right? But there are a lot that are unnecessary, but how do you make them unnecessary is the real question, right? It's
Yeah.
through diet and lifestyle. And when you actually put that in the forefront of the health, not in the back burner, you actually get results, right? And this is something that we were still teaching practitioners. I know you don't like the word provider. We want to talk about that. Is why is it still not mainstream? I guess that's the question I want to know. We know that lifestyle education is empowering and it is really, really beneficial, but we're not teaching it in our settings as a standard of care. I guess I'm trying to get to you like how you got to where you are, but it makes sense. Like I'm teaching this now, you were teaching this so long ago, and I'm still trying to force feed pharmacists and other practitioners that have been trained. It's like, can you ask them about their stress level before you go all the way down to the blah, blah,
Well, I think this is probably a truth for so many things in life. You have to meet people where they're at, and not just the patient, but other people around you that are helping care for that patient, or maybe family members, even. And so the parallels are distinct. The analogy in the field of menopause care and menopause medicine is nowadays, like, dare I say, the word hormone, because everyone, it's like kind of, sorry, Oprah's like, everyone gets a car, everyone gets hormones,
Mm-hmm.
and there's absolutely nothing wrong with hormones. Oh my God, we're kind of debunking this ancient Women's Health Initiative data that actually was harmful. Modern use of hormones is absolutely essential in so many ways. But guess what? We can also do so many things that have nothing to do with a prescription to help women in this phase. But you have to meet this individual woman right in front of you where she's at, because you can't sit there and either preach about medicines or preach about holistic care, because you don't know what makes them tick. You don't know what they're going to respond to. And so you can kind of nudge that needle a little bit, because maybe they haven't heard about other things that, So I think it's a partnership, it's a dialogue, it's listening, it's respecting and honoring and being kind. It's the, compassionate care. It's all of that. And I think honestly, we live in this fast-paced, follow the money, click the boxes, boom, 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 next patient, next patient. And sadly, I have so many colleagues who probably agree with what I just all said, but they're too freaking busy.
Mhm.
The pressures on them, and I will blame just the modern healthcare environment, which is just completely broken in this country. And you can't possibly sit down and talk to a patient about all those nuanced things in a 10-minute visit. It's never going to happen. So I think there's so many, peeling back the layers, just so many reasons for why this is not necessarily embraced. It's not like people don't believe in it. But then dare I go on this little slippery slope where we have, people went to outsource and crowdsource their healthcare and listen to the influencers and, get their snake oil, this and that. It's just, it's sad, because if we could just pull it back in a grounded way to this very intimate, and I'm a doctor, so a doctor-patient relationship, that is the here and the now. And that's how you connect with someone. And that's how you give someone care. And I just think there has to be more of that.
Yeah, I love that. I love talking to, doctors and other practitioners in this space, because what you said is key capital truth, right? When you establish a connection and you're empathic, like they've done studies to show the doctor that just checks the boxes and gives the script to the person that's sick versus the doctor that sits next to them, holds their hand, like looks them in the eye. They actually have done studies to show that those people without the prescription get better faster.
Well,
So
here's a caveat to
we know that this stuff is real. And yes, I don't think doctors or patients or people will disagree, but I feel like we have a place to start this in a new way, right? Like to this is why the cash model is really important right now, because the payer system isn't caught up to that, right? 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 6 minutes, 6 minutes, this, check the boxes, go. But, with technology brewing and all these other things, it's like the human connection. We've done a whole podcast just on connection, and like where that lies in the medical model of what we have today, but also the future.
Well, and a caveat to what you said a moment ago is they have done the proverbial they have done studies looking at the perception of time spent in the exam room. And you can take a physician who is listening, the laptop's closed, they're making eye contact, they're engaged, and they're listening, allowing a lot of time, not cutting someone off. And that patient may have only been in that room for like 5 minutes, but they feel like they had the most amazing, engaging care. They love their doctor, et cetera, et cetera. Well, contrast that to someone who, is spending 40 minutes with a patient. That's far more than 5 minutes. And then the patient leaves the room and say, well, I never had time for my issues. They didn't really let me finish. And I didn't get a chance to really go over things that I really wanted to talk about. And that person, that doctor's not very good. So, I mean, it sounds insane, but the perception of time, 5 minutes is infinitely shorter than 40 minutes, yet that 5 minute was such an amazing interaction. So I just think there has to be more of that parsed out and
Yeah.
to tell people like, yeah, you don't have to, like, the reality is very few doctors are going to have 40-minute slots all day long. The dollar bills are not going to be coming into their administrative office. And sadly, unless it's like a new patient physical with a whole bunch of other things going on, or they have a cancellation, that they just don't have that time. But the perception of time you can make it more than what people are.
Oh, I love, well, that's truth, right? It's like reality is perception, right? And it goes back to the same thing of like co-creation, right? We're co-creating this plan. We're empowering the person to take charge in their own healthcare and not have the doctor for 40 minutes tell you what's wrong with you, right? And move it through the whole thing. But it's isn't it's so it's the what I'm coming up with is like it's the same adage, like people want to be seen, heard, and understood. And
Yeah.
if the doctor, I've had more testimonials on my side of things when I say, because when when we do cash wellness and things like that, we do an hour with the patient, right? And then I after that session, they go, no one's ever sat down with me where I can go through my story. I get more out of that personally and through outcomes just because they were heard, right? And that's what starts, I feel, this is the difference between transactional, like symptom management versus true healing, right? When we're talking down this path. And I think that I'm glad that you kind of flowered that up and opened that up because it is so important. Um, you open the door, so I want to go here now. Let's talk about menopause. You went there because I think it's really crucial. And yes, we are debunking why, like, hormones good, hormones bad, hormones this, like, but you let's talk about the menopause menu and like what inspired you to build this community, write the book, and let's talk about those non-prescriptive things because I too am in the same boat. Like when I do a hormone consult, it's not like hormones yes, hormones no. It's which path is best for you as we inform you on these things. And let's talk about some of the things non hormonal that replacement or restoration that we can do right now, right? People just don't think there. They just, I do compounding. I do a lot of good hormones and we do it right. But I still think there's a ton to talk about outside of just the prescription in this realm. And I know you're super passionate about it. And there's a lot of this going on right now. So I kind of wanted to spend some time and energy into this.
Yeah. So after 25 years, I pivoted, that great big P word, pivoted, left my big practice that was quite robust. I think I was two and a half docs in one. So they saw a lot of dollar bills walking out the door there. I slept for a few weeks, regained my sanity, my creativity, my passion, my human focus. And I had already developed a website, menopausemenu.com, before I left. And so then I kind of put more energy and effort into it. And it really was something that I just was so passionate about because over the decades, I took care of quite a few patients, obviously, many of them women and many of them going through menopause. And dare I say the word gaslight because, it's maybe overused, but honestly, I think women have been gaslit so many times. They're gun shy because, I cannot tell you how many times a woman might come in and say like, oh my gosh, I saw my whatever specialist. It's like, they told me I'm just a little stressed out. It's like, well, you're 48, you're having some hot flashes and night sweats, your sleep sucks. Your relationship is kind of a little rocky. Your kids are, you're rapidly becoming an empty nester and your periods are starting to fall off. I'm like, oh yeah, like you're in perimenopause. Like, no, you're not. It's not, you can't just write this off as like, oh, go do some yoga. That is not going to help. So hormones can be absolutely vital for women in many different ways.
Mhm.
And sadly, they've been told, we've been told as physicians, oh, dangerous, breast cancer is going to cause blood clots and stroke and cirrhosis and the things that, of course, no one in the right minds would want. But we've now embraced a lot of good new data talking about ways to reduce risk for heart disease, reduce risk for osteoporosis,
Yep.
reduce your what they call genital urinary syndrome of menopause, and vaginal dryness, and urinary frequency, and maybe libido is crashing, and there's so many other things. Of course, hot flashes, night sweats, and sleep disruption. So all those things can be absolutely benefited by in taking hormones in some women and in many women. But it's not ever just black and white, all or none, yes, no. It's yes and, right? It's how can we blend that with, oh, there are ways to like surf the wave, when it comes to predicting a hot flash, how you can kind of navigate that, not necessarily rip your clothes off, or maybe you're having spicy food, or maybe you're having too much hot food, or you're exercising before bed, or you're doing things that maybe you're provoking this a little bit. And so you can kind of start to chill and recognize there are things you can do that you can empower yourself to change. Sleep. Oh, you could talk about sleep for hours, but there are ways to improve the sleep dynamic. So it's both. And I think that that's where the shaming has to stop. This is a natural time that every woman goes through. Some go through this phase quite early if they've had surgery and their ovaries have been removed, or they have another medical problem, or they've had cancer and chemo has like screwed up their hormones. So there's a lot there. Again, come to meet someone where they're at, understand what they're interested in, what would be of good service to them and their body, and then teach them, educate them, and work with them.
I love it. It's and what kept resonating for me is that same like process of like when you said both and, right? It's the art in the science, right? You can go all the way down to the labs and just slather them full of hormones, but like yes, all that art and all the things we need to do of what's this is, to me, this is where the personalization comes from, right? And this is where the Amazons and the chains and everybody else in the world can't touch the one size fits all pharma thing for menopause. It's like the hormones themselves are a symphony, right? We know that we need to balance them so the trumpet isn't just blaring out in the we're just moving one, but at the same time, it's that art. It's like, how's your sleep? And like, how can we navigate these things with nutrition and other types of processes? So that built, and you've built it now. You've revamped it a little bit. You've refreshed it. MenopauseMenu.com. It's a free resource, right? People can go there and get information.
Yeah. And, under the tab at the top, information, there's 16 sub pages. So, and each correlate with one of the more common symptoms. Like there's a whole page that has like a million things about hot flash. There's a whole page for, low libido problems, a whole page for musculoskeletal issues or for skin issues, and so on and so forth. And in fact, they serve the kind of platform upon which I then wrote my book. So my book has 16 chapters correlating with those 16 pages. And, I think it's really been fun to, refresh it now because like, I, you know, I had a web designer. He was fabulous. He still is fabulous. But, I didn't really get as much value out of this website. It was kind of more just like, oh, I'll just throw stuff on it and people can go there as a resource. Well, yeah, I can do that, but that's not really, people don't have the time these days. So now it's refreshed. And when people subscribe, they get, this welcome sequence, they get a free gift, they get kind of helpful emails that really nurture and support and get them excited. And I think that's been really nice to put some energy into that. And my book was really one of these, again, get misty eyed thinking about my mother. Late mother was an artist. I remember when I was a child, this is back in the early 70s. I remember these big art books on our coffee table. It could be Renoir, it could be Degas, it could be Emily Carr, it could be Georgia O'Keeffe, whatever. And you open this art book. I mean, it had a heft. It was heavy. It was big. You put it in your lap. And then you just randomly open to a page and maybe look at this beautiful painting or drawing or picture, and then maybe read the caption or something else. Like 5 minutes go by and you close the book, you put it back on the coffee table, and you go about your day. So I wanted to create a book for menopause that was like that kind of an art book. So you don't read it from cover to cover. I mean, you could, but you could literally open it, get my book here. We could literally, here's the cover, one of my mother's paintings. You could open it to any chapter. Like I just open randomly to page 96. It's about body image. And you could just read for like 2 or 3 minutes about body image and then close it up, And so you don't have to, it's not a medical text. It's not boring, but it's not dumbed down. It's actually very palatable, uh,
Modernized. Yeah.
good information, lots of pictures, lots of color pictures, recipes. So, I mean, I like to surround myself with food. So there's recipes in there. But to me, that experiential part was really important to me.
No, and we learn through experience, right? So when you have a book on your table, like part of my self care routine is to read 15 minutes every morning and read something that I'm going to, it's not the news. It's not scrolling on my scroll of death. It's not any of that. It's learning something. And I'm a big fan of learning, and I could spend hours every morning, but at least 15 minutes, I'm doing something to grow and learn. So this is like a beautiful resource for just your self-care. It's like, let's open up a tab and let's see what I can just put into my field of awareness today, right? One little thing, one little quib that could help me. And then over time, it just builds, right? These are how these things are awesome, because they build over time. And all of a sudden, you've got tools in your toolbox instead of being on the sidelines of your menopause and suffering. And yes, it's a big deal. I just had a conversation with someone. It was either on a podcast or just one of my colleagues, where we talked about, like, when a female is coming through puberty, and it's this big deal, right? We put all this emphasis on transitioning into womanhood, and then women that transition out into men, like, there's no like big deal about it. It's like, like you said, stuff it aside. It's just hot flashes. You can deal with it. Go do yoga. Like, no, it's a big deal. This is a transitionary period in people's lives that we sort of forgot that it's like a big deal, not just hormonal. It's a life-changing experience. And my wife is in the middle of this, and we are in the middle of this together, because it is a big deal. And I'm glad that you've put these resources out there. You've got the book now. I guess I want to say, like, when it comes to menopause, what do you think is the most common myths or challenges you're seeing, um who aren't, when they're not supported in a system? Like, what is the common thing? I know your book is going to address them, but like, if we're talking about this right now, what are these common challenges in this, in today's modern world? Because I think if we take the lens of, you know 30 years ago, it's going to be very different. We were giving, pregnant mares horse urine for hormones, right? Premarin. Yes, that's what it stands for. And we figured out it was bad. Like, so we're not there. We're in the modernized world. We have the modernized stuff, but in your eyes, because you've been dealing with this and helping people for so long, what do you think the challenges people are seeing in the misconceptions or myths right now?
Oh, there's so many. And the first thing I wanted to mention, which is kind of partially an answer to your question, is you mentioned your wife. Like, one of my taglines is everyone knows someone going through menopause.
Right.
And so one of the misconceptions, like, oh, I'm male, so it doesn't apply to me. It's like, yep. If you know a woman, then it does apply to you. If you have a mother, an aunt, a wife, a
Sure.
daughter, a sister, yeah, and so this kind of myth, like, oh, that's a woman's thing. Like, no, it's an everyone's thing. So that's the first kind of, thing to really recognize. I do feel like we're thankfully in an era where it's easier to talk about things. Oh my God, there's so many taboo subjects in the past. You would never say a word about a vagina. You would never say a word about your bladder problems. You never say a word about libido or about anything like that. Oh my God, your periods. But now that's not taboo to talk about. And it's validating, especially if women don't feel shamed if they bring it up. I mean, what better than in a private place, especially in closed door, and they're with their doctor in their exam room, to bring up things that are very sensitive, or maybe they're embarrassed by, or they're just kind of don't even really know where to start. And so allowing that space to talk about things, I think we're really well ahead of where we used to be. Um, I feel like, though, that sadly, this extrapolates into almost anything in the healthcare field, but certainly when it comes to menopause, it, the the kind of trickery that's afoot, the misstatements or flat out lies from many influencers or folks who are just
Mhm.
trying to sell things. You can get anything online nowadays. I mean, almost. And where do women turn to get valid information? How do they know that, if their cousin or best friend or their colleague at work, like, oh, I did this, try this. Like, is that the best way to get health information? Maybe, maybe not. If they read something, because everyone's on their phones, I mean, if there's an app for all that, if is that where they go to Facebook or whatever, Instagram? I mean, is that where they get their information from? Maybe, maybe not. So we've gotten into this very, very, very different dynamic in terms of how information is imparted and how we share information. And I'm not going to bring politics into discussion, but in our current very polarized world that we live in now in this country, there's mistrust. There's, oh, that doctor's just trying to make some money. I'm just going to follow what this influencer says. I mean, that is kind of the worst case scenario. But so I think that we have to ground ourselves in the things I've already said. Like, I'm going to turn blue in the face, saying it all over again. You know, where is this person from? What makes them, what resonates with them? How can we show them, tell them, help them understand um, information better? One great example, and this is going to maybe uh, cause friction in some areas, is checking blood levels. So you don't need to check a blood test to understand if a woman's going through menopause. You don't. It's like, great example. You don't check your 13-year-old or 12-year-old or whatever year old to say, oh, yeah, blood test says they're going through puberty. You don't. You know they're going through puberty. Everybody,
Right?
right?
Yes.
So you don't need a blood test for the vast majority of women who are going through perimenopause. Now, there are exceptions, of course, to anything. If you're 32 and your periods are hit and miss, like, oh my God, I need a whole bunch of blood tests. You know, if you're 61 and you have spotting, oh my God, that's like the worst thing. You probably need more than a blood test. You need an ultrasound and an exam. So, but for the vast majority of women who are in their mid to late 40s or early 50s or mid 50s, and they have a lot of things going on, there's no blood test that's needed. And consequently, and here's the controversial part, you don't need to follow levels. It's like, again, the puberty example. When they're 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, you're not checking levels again. Duh, they've gone through puberty, you
They're
know?
going this way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same thing. And, you don't adjust the hormones to get a certain level because those levels change circadian rhythm day and night. They change
Mhm.
week to week. They change. So there's so much, sadly, misinformation out there in the big world wide web about, like, oh, get your levels and follow your levels. It's just not valid. It's not evidence based. And so that's where I think women and men need to watch their wallets. I mean, you can just spend so much money on stuff that is not supporting you.
I that's two good points that I want to talk about. One is like when like you said, like don't follow the doctor, follow the influencer. And for me, obviously we need some level of authority. And when I say that, it's you've learned it, you've experienced, you're professional, right? Professionals have gone through certain trainings in order to be able to speak to these things. And there's this gray area in wellness where you could take the cannabis industry, the psychedelic industry, the supplement industry. Like there's this area where you're not like you or me, or we've dedicated lots of hours into this, probably could write a PhD on it by the time we're done. And then all of a sudden you've got someone that's just like, let's just talk about this supplement and go on the internet. So I think having a trusted guide that like, and trust is always key. And I think there's something to be said around, so there is something to be said around credentials, and we're talking both and here, and there's also like this part where you've lived this experience, you've gone through it yourself, kind of process that I talk a lot of practitioners around is like they've gone through their journey and they want to now feel compelled to help people. I don't like the word influencer, because if I have to be influenced to follow you or influenced to buy something from you, that means it wasn't really in my own resonance, right? If somebody feels it, and then it's kind of like I'm trusting more and more of this than this, and blending the two together. And this is part of what I love to do, is teaching men to go from here to here. Um, because there is some part of that that's real and that the science is catching up to. So I'm glad you brought that part up. Trusted source and professional means we have some level, you're an MD, you're talking about this on a high level of the science, but also that art that we talked. It's that merging of the two. It's why I say ancient wisdom meets modern science, because it's both. And then I love how you went down to the simplistic route, because all the things we talk about is how can we make it simpler? How can we make this simple? Like even your book, and like revamping your website into bite-sized pieces so people can absorb them in this day and age where we're super busy. Just read one page. But if you read one page for 30 days, you've read a good amount and had a lot of knowledge. So those are simplistic always resonates with me. Like wellness made simple is like, are you nailing the easy stuff first?
Yeah.
So that's where I think we're moving towards. And I think I'm talking more about that in these things. You speak really powerfully about moral injury and burnout. So for you, what were the signs, and how did you move through that? Like this is a real big topic of conversation that we're having a lot, especially as it relates to the healthcare field, because I'm really passionate about this subject too, of how do we help these beautiful people in the healthcare field that are experiencing their own levels of burnout and unhealth, right?
I I don't really think I was burned out. I was facing moral injury head on. And there's a distinct difference. There's so many people in different fields and different walks of life that have been burned out. Pandemic, of course, didn't help any of that. It could be someone who's working in all those different service industries, it could be restaurant workers, it could be librarians, it could be teachers, so it's not just a healthcare phenomenon. But the moral injury part was my I can't cross this line. And it really kind of, there's so much I could talk for hours, but there's so much behind that. And really kind of what I would distill it down to is that, you know, there's a calling when you come into medicine. The truest part of it is you're coming in to serve, you're coming in to help people, help human beings, hopefully help heal them or diagnose them and help them heal. And there's an intimacy with that, and the corporatization of our health industry has kind of
Mm.
sliced and diced that in so many ways that are negative. And then there's this what's called healthcare consolidation, where we have upwards of almost 80% of all physicians now working for big corporations. And what do big corporations do? They care about the bottom line, good old dollar bills. They care about if their stock, they care about their investors. They care about the markets. And that is the absolute polar opposite of what most of us, and I'll talk about myself because I can't talk about other people, but that's the exact opposite of why I went into medicine. So there's a huge disconnect at the end of the day. When you're box checking and you're just filling out metrics and you want your little stupid bonus because you have to do X, Y, and Z. And that is not caring for people anymore. And so that was one of the big, like, yeah, I'm out of here. And my story is probably best told in a bar with a drink. But truthfully, I think I tossed hand grenades as I left. I mean, it was just kind of like, gotta get out of here. And I'm really glad because I got my sanity together, and I, as I created my business, myMDadvocate, I did the best thing I could have ever done accidentally. Like I didn't research how to start a business. Well, I kind of did a little bit, but I didn't go to business school. I was a doctor. I am a doctor. What I did, this is during the pandemic, was I had 2 online Zoom focus groups with former patients and 25 each, is about 50 patients. And I pressed record and I said, this will never see the light of day. I'm just recording just so I can watch it later and take notes because it's hard to like take notes when you're talking and interacting. And so I had a little 5-minute spiel and then I just let it rip. And then people would ask, of course, half of them was like, oh, Dr. B, it's so great to see you. It's like, oh, I love you too. But what would you like to see in your business? It was just like this love fest. And I listened and I learned. I learned price points. I learned like whether they'd feel comfortable or not doing telemedicine only. All these different things that help kind of shape and mold what I was going to do. Fast forward to now, I can really be very satisfied because my business is kind of an advocacy and medical consultation business. So I'm still an MD. I keep my title. I pay my dues and all that. I have my license, but I can listen. I have the time. I can kind of talk about things that a lot of people don't get support, like how to navigate medical systems, how to find doctors. I'm not a doctor finder, but sure, I can help people. I've been doing that my whole profession, like how to get a good cardiologist, how to get a good whateverologist. And then people who are just, not sure about how to proceed. And here's a great example because early on I was a little concerned about like, gosh, are my colleagues going to feel threatened? Like, what is Susan doing? Like, this is, is she going to look over what I'm doing? But I remember this one situation where someone was seeing a really good cardiologist and of course they gave him a statin. And this patient then saw me and said like, oh, I don't want to be on the statin. I said, well, let's start to sift through this. And I have, again, all the permissions to get into the medical record. We went through all the details of, kind of the thought process that was instant in the cardiologist's mind, but they didn't have the time to talk about. And I said, you know what? You actually do need to be on a statin, and here's why. And I go through all the reasons why. And I said, here's what you can also do: nutrition, exercise, et cetera, in concert. And this is when you probably should go back and get your labs done. And then over time, maybe you won't need quite so much of a dose. And who knows, maybe get off, maybe not. Again, I had a dialogue with someone and they came away from that meeting thinking like, oh my God, thank God. And what I did, and I was really proud of this, I said, you have a really good cardiologist. They just didn't have the time. And so I'm like this distant team member, this kind of, ghost team member, so that person went back to their appointment and was doing just great, no side effects and was doing fine. And, the note stayed with me and the patient because I always asked if you want me to forward the note and they didn't want to. And that's fine, totally fine. Well, you know, that's one person I helped. I'm super happy with that.
Well, that's again, you touched on it, and I asked pharmacy because we precept and guide pharmacists in like 4 different pharmacy schools, and so they come in different years, and we teach them all about wellness, and we start to teach them we start to unlearn some of the things they've learned just because they need to. And that's the first thing I ask them. I said, why do you want to be a pharmacist? And they always say, because I want to help people. And then you end up, and in today's modern world, you touched on it, but it's the big corporations, right? They're buying all the medical practices. They're buying all the pharmacies, right? So you're thinking like, oh, it's just Walgreens and this big chain. It's like, no, VC wants to buy Walgreens so they can control more of the process. And here we are at the end, the other side of that, as pharmacists and nurses and doctors really trying to help people, and we're stuck because the machine is telling us to do this. And so I love where you just kind of just said, and I got to help somebody today. And that's what fulfills me. We talk a lot about fulfillment as a healthcare practitioner, in healthcare and well care. Like, we do truly want to help people, and we're stuck in the system sometimes. And you and I have made big, bold decisions to say no more, right? That moral injury is not bad. I had a beautiful conversation with a physician who teaches physicians how to be whole inside and still be in that practice, right? So it's possible either way. But I too resonate with that, like that moral injury, because at the end of the day, I truly want to help people heal. I don't want to manage their symptoms. I want them to be in the driver's seat. We can do that. And then you have these beautiful testimonials through your conversations that say, wow, you took the right amount of time and you listened, and now I feel heard. And now that care has been shifted. And then that I feel that's how people truly heal.
Yeah. Well,
So
I
it's
think
it,
that,
my MD advocate. Is that it?
yeah, myMDadvocate, myMDadvocate.com is the website. In fact, I have two parts to the website. One is the patient facing part, which is the main website, myMDadvocate.com. And it kind of goes through everything. And it's really for patients in Washington State. And then there's the physician side. There's under the physician tab, there's a whole host of other options. And I can help any physician in the country. So it's not just Washington State. And particularly interested in working with colleagues who are mid-career or maybe pre-retirement, not ready to retire yet. And they're just like, you know what? I want to do something different, but I'm not ready to quit. So I don't know what I should do, or tell me about direct care, or what about telemedicine, or maybe partnering with some other person, or, and I had a recent consultation with a physician in Indiana who was quasi-retired, but not quite ready to completely retire, and working with a speech pathologist who already had a business that she had just started, and so kind of teaming up. And so it's just really nice to lend my wisdom, so to speak, to kind of help people navigate that journey, either just from the big perspective or even drilling down to like, oh, how does it work? Like, do I need an attorney for this? And what about that? And what about my licensure? And so it's the nuts and bolts part, which is also fun for me to help colleagues with.
And I'm seeing more of that, right? More of this like not alternative, but like we're moving in this, I feel, golden age where AI is going to help with certain things, and technologies and frequencies and all these things that are coming up on the modern science. But that connection, the human part, right? The things that we're doing. And I love that you're advocating for this like new system where, hey, I just don't feel I'm over here, but I want to still help people, and you can still bring them through, like, it's mentoring, guiding 101. Like, get there faster, get there cheaper, get there with less energy because I've done it, and I'm going to help you do it too. Right. And I love that because I'm talking to more physicians, more nurses. In my field, I do this with pharmacists. It's like they don't want to just sling pills and do any of that anymore, and they're not getting paid, and it's all frustrating for them. And it's like, well, let's use this. Let's figure out what you can do to help others in these other ways. And so thank you for that. Thank you for what you're doing in that space. It feels good to be in this world right now because we're doing these things.
Yeah.
Um,
And I would say the one thing that I've done too, which was impossible in my previous uh, company, even though I was a physician owner. But as I venture into my 60s here, my golden handcuffs are gone. My muzzle is gone. I can speak my truth in ways that so many of my colleagues wish they could, but they can't because they don't want to get fired. And they have, basically do not compete clauses and all these things are just kind of garbaging up their contracts. And so I can advocate for my colleagues and my patients in ways I never thought imaginable. An example, last year, I mean, who knew I had the guts to be on the national stage a couple times. So I was remotely involved with the ICCR, the Interfaith Center for Corporate Responsibility. They had their New York City conference, and folks may know Wendell Potter. He's pretty famous. I spoke alongside Wendell, and then he gave me advice later. It was great. And then Stat News, a national organization, had their Boston summit. That was late last year. I was on stage there talking about the big behemoth, the United Healthcare, and this is before the murder. But my focus is always front and center: patient safety uh, and transparency. And that, by the way, is why I dislike that word provider, because that word kind of neutralizes everyone. I find that word is offensive to call a nurse a provider, to call a PA a provider, to call a chiropractor a provider, to call an MD or DO a provider, because the patient hears that word and they don't know what this person is in front of them. And I think everyone needs to use their title because that gives a different flavor. If you have someone sitting down with you in the ER and they're a social worker, you want to know they're a social worker, not a provider. If someone's talking to you about a surgery and they're an MD, that's going to be a different flavor than someone who's a pharmacist. And someone's talking about, this is not pitting anyone against, there's no room for ego here. It's all about clarity and transparency and honesty. And boy, when you're sick, maybe you're near death. It doesn't matter. You just want to be saved. Who cares what someone's called? But in a non-emergent situation, I think patients deserve to know from whom they're getting care. So that's where I come at from that term. I just think it's not kind. And in fact, it's misleading.
Yeah, well, it's ambiguous, right? And that makes a lot of sense, right? When you got to know your audience, you want to know who you're talking to, and it does put a flavor on it. I talk. That's why when I have this, and even when you have multiple credentials, it's almost like when I'm in the wellness field, I'm not talking to them as a pharmacist. I'm talking to them as a functional medicine practitioner. And I went through the same training as nurses and doctors and healthcare workers and, health coaches. And then I say, I speak from a lens of the pharmacist because that's where I came from. And so this is what you're getting, right? If I'm in an energy medicine session, I'm not going to speak to them as a pharmacist. I'm going to tell them I'm certified in energy medicine,
If
right?
you're a Reiki master, who cares if you're at RPH
Right.
or not?
Because that's what they came for. And so I also said, just like, I lighten things up because I think
Yeah.
in this day and age, we're also really heavy. And I was like, I speak science and woo. Which way do you want to go today?
And this is going to sound laughable, but I'd rather be called human than provider because we're all human.
Well, and and that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up because on the other side of the equation, like, we want to be treated as humans, whether you're the doctor or the patient. We're all humans. We're living this human experience with these five senses and the same kind of consciousness. And so I like just treating people as people, right? It's like, and when I have a conversation, I just get on that level. Like, it's a level conversation where we can help each other. And I've had conversations with physicians and doctors and everything, is like, and people learn from their peers too. Like, they learn from them, and this is why the group settings are important, right? And so we're moving in this direction where we can save our time by going into groups some of the time and to learn from the peers and the person that's delivering the message. So that's all beautiful and awesome. Before we wrap up, I want to get into the art piece a little bit, the art and science, because you walk daily, you love nature photos, you write, you speak, you guide others. How has creativity and the art part helped you heal or come alive with you and your patients?
Oh, I could talk about that for hours, but let me just give you one or two
Yeah, give her some nuggets.
great examples.
This is so important, I think.
Here's a story that will live with me for the rest of my life. So I mentioned before, my late mother was an artist, and miss her dearly. And I had, I think, 25 of her paintings in my big office suite in my previous company, and several in each of my exam rooms. And I'll never forget this woman who traveled from Montana, which is 2 states over from Washington, traveled from Montana, annual exam with me. So she was put in the room by my medical assistant, gowned and everything ready for me to go. And I walked in saying her name, hello, and I froze because she was standing in front of one of my mother's fairly abstract paintings. And she was like almost like she was in a gallery, except she's wearing a robe. She like in an art gallery. She's looking at it very intently. And I almost felt like I was intruding on this incredible moment. Like I almost wanted to leave the room. And I think I maybe even started to back out. And she goes, oh, sorry. And so she sat down and we did her visit, etc. Well, a couple of weeks passed and she sent me a letter. Oh my God, I'm going to cry. She goes, Dr. B, I just want to let you know what was happening when you walked in on me looking at your mother's painting. And she said, when I saw this painting, I immediately was taken back to, like, I'm just saying 1972, sometime in the 1970s, on the Jersey Shore, and the waves coming in and the birds flying by the shore. She said that painting took me there. And that was a beautiful moment in her life. Her daughter was young on the beach, et cetera. All these things had happened since then that weren't good in her life. And she goes, I just was transfixed by that. And she said it was so beautiful. I was like, oh my God. So I said, can I tell your story? And I've told her story many times without using your name. But that was just so amazing. So amazing to kind of share that moment with her and reach out through that painting. So that's just, again, and then fast forward, one of my other paintings, this is from the painting. One of my mother's is a big, huge work that was in my exam room. And it was from the 1980s when she did life drawing from the nude figure. And this was back in the Art Gallery of Peterborough in Peterborough, Ontario, Canada, where I lived for quite a while. And it was an upstairs level, closed off the general public. And it was a heated room, and they would have like a university student wanting to make more money, disrobe. So they would stand on a plinth or maybe sit in a chair or just pose nude. And then usually up to maybe 10 or 12 artists with their easels and their contact crayon and their chalk and whatever, charcoal would do sketches. And my mother would take one or two of these sketches and turn them into full-fledged works. And two of them ended up in my exam room. So many times I'd have people say, like, wow, that's really amazing. And we'd then talk about art for a few minutes, and maybe they would talk about their experience of, maybe they went to the Louvre or something. But, it was just that magical moment. And I have much of my own art to talk about, but those are those stories that I just cherish. And I think that, again, you're connecting with someone in a way that is so
Yeah.
important and so beautiful. It's just part of me.
I love that. And you get to not only share something that's important to you, but that connection, like just going back to like someone that can, just because they happen to go to your office with that particular painting in there, and they go back to that peak emotional experience that brought them this joy and happiness. You bring joy and happiness. And I say this all the time when I'm teaching wellness to the pharmacists that I teach, is like, those are the intangibles that you bring to the table that actually can transfix them into the healing journey. Like, it's not the diagnosis or the supplement or the protocol. Sometimes it's literally that. And
Or the time spent.
right, or the time spent, right? We made a great point. Like 40 minutes or five can be all that it takes. And that's where I think we're moving. Like, that's where I think we can do what we need to do in the time that we need to do it. We could go on probably, yes, for another 2 hours. But our time and space is limited today. But I always love the one thing, right? What's the one thing or the message you want most physicians and patients to take from your journey and our conversation today?
It's going to be insanely simple. It's listen,
Mm,
have some empty space. Maybe when there's no conversation, no talking, be present with someone. And that goes for patients too, because doctors are human beings, and they're not perfect. And try, emphasis on try to not let the system problems, poison and pollute this beautiful relationship, because it's hard not to sometimes. So I think just listening, being present, and in whatever way that entails for each individual.
I love that. It's the word patience is kind of like, not patience people, but patience, right? This is why I don't like the word patient, because it's misleading too, right? Am I talking patience? More patience. But that's the word that keeps coming up for me. So I love that the space in between the notes is the music, right? So where can people follow you, link you? Like, I know we have the menopausemenu.com, the myMDadvocate.com. So those are your .coms. Those are your living rooms. Are you on any of the other channels? What can people find you, get more information, or is that it? Is that good?
Yeah, so menopausemenu.com, so subscribe because I would love to share my wisdom with people. I'm also on LinkedIn, and that's kind of where I do most of my social media stuff. I do have a Facebook presence. I have a Facebook Menopause Menu page. I also have a private group called Mosaic Wisdom for Women. So there's lots of different ways to kind of connect with me. I have a YouTube channel. Oh my gosh. But I would say menopausemenu.com is the really free information, public facing way to interact. And then myMDadvocate.com, where you can find my email, which is Susan at myMDadvocate.com. And I just love when people reach out.
Love that. Beautiful. Dr. B, Susan, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for your wisdom, but also just like who you are and why and what you're doing. It just resonates right off the screen because you can tell you're passionate about this. You're smiling the whole way through. And that to me, that's energy, right? And energy is where things are moving. So I love this. This was a beautiful conversation. So just thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
All right, that's a wrap, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this episode. I think there's a ton of value in here for lots of different things. Until next time, stay well. Thanks for joining me today on Beyond the Pills. If our mission to deprescribe 10 million unnecessary medications resonates with you, share this episode, subscribe, and leave a review. Whether you're a practitioner or someone ready to reclaim your health, visit rx2wellness.com for free resources to begin your journey. Together, let's go beyond the pills and co-create a world of vibrant health and true healing. Until next time, live better and stay well.